Let's start here because this is the pivot point that changes everything. You cannot learn how to sell without being salesy until you first redefine what selling actually is. For most people, the word sales carries baggage. It conjures images of pressure, manipulation, and the kind of conversations where someone talks at you until you finally give in just to escape. If that is your frame of reference, then of course selling feels uncomfortable. Of course you'll resist it, or worse, you'll try to mimic it and end up feeling fake. The problem isn't selling itself. The problem is how we've been taught to define it. At its core, selling is not about extracting something from someone. It is not about convincing or cornering. True selling is about serving. It's about identifying a real problem someone has, presenting a real solution that can help them, and guiding them toward the decision that improves their life. When you strip it down to that essence, selling stops being an act of manipulation and becomes an act of leadership. It's about helping people move from where they are to where they want to be. Now, this requires a mental shift that is both psychological and philosophical. Psychologically, most people enter a sales conversation thinking, I need to get this person to buy. That frame immediately creates tension because your focus is on yourself, not them. It creates a push energy. They feel you trying to move them toward your agenda, and human nature resists being pushed. But when you retrain your brain to think, how can I serve this person? How can I help them make the best possible decision for themselves? Everything changes. You show up differently. You ask better questions. You listen more. And because you're not hiding an agenda, the other person feels safe. They lean in instead of pulling away. Philosophically, this shift matters because selling, when defined as serving, aligns with human dignity. Manipulation strips people of choice. Service empowers it. Manipulation hides the truth. Service illuminates it. And people can feel the difference. They may not consciously articulate it, but they know when someone is trying to get something from them versus when someone is trying to give something to them. One builds resistance, the other builds trust. Think about the best experiences you've ever had with a salesperson. Chances are it didn't feel like sales at all. It felt like someone took the time to understand you, to see what you really wanted, and to recommend something that fit your life. You probably walked away grateful, not resentful. That's the power of serving. And here's the deeper truth. When selling is serving, it's not just good for the buyer, it's good for you. Because serving is sustainable. You don't have to psyche yourself up or force yourself into a persona that isn't natural. You simply show up to help, and help is something you can always feel authentic about. But let me be clear, serving is not about giving away everything for free, nor is it about being passive. Some confuse service with weakness. They think serving means standing back and hoping the buyer figures it out. That's not service, that's abdication. Service means leading with clarity, with confidence, and with conviction. It means saying, I understand your problem, I know this solution can help, and I care enough to tell you the truth about what it will take to get where you want to go. That is service at the highest level. It's not passive, it's powerful. And this is where selling and integrity intersect. If you truly believe in the value of what you offer, then not presenting it would be a disservice. Imagine a doctor who knows the cure but refuses to share it because he doesn't want to seem pushy. That's not humility, that's negligence. In the same way, if you know your product or service can solve someone's problem, then it is your responsibility to present it clearly, confidently, and compellingly. That is serving. That is selling without being salesy. What happens when you adopt this mindset? You stop worrying about rejection because you realize you're not trying to extract, you're trying to extend help. Some will say yes, some will say no. But either way, you walked in with integrity. You stop worrying about sounding scripted because you're not acting, you're simply connecting. And you stop dreading the sales process because it no longer feels like taking, it feels like giving. So here's the reflection I want to leave with you. Selling only feels salesy when it's about you. When it becomes about them, about their need, their problem, their potential transformation, it becomes service. And service never feels fake. Service feels like love in action. The moment you redefine selling as serving is the moment selling becomes natural, effortless, and even joyful. Because you're no longer trying to convince anyone of anything. You're simply helping them step in the solution they were already looking for. And that is not sales at all. That is service, and service is unstoppable. If redefining selling as serving is the first shift, then building trust through authentic connection is the natural next step. Because no matter how powerful your product is, no matter how well you position it, if the person you're speaking with doesn't trust you, they will never feel safe enough to say yes. Trust is the foundation of every meaningful transaction, not just in sales, but in life. And yet most people overlook it. They try to perfect their pitch, polish their presentation, and memorize closing techniques while ignoring the simple truth that people don't buy from people they don't trust. Trust isn't built through clever words. It's not built through polished slides or scripted lines. It's built through connection. And connection begins with authenticity. People have finely tuned detectors for insincerity. They may not be able to explain why they don't feel comfortable, but they sense it. If you approach a conversation with hidden motives, if you're listening only so you can respond, if you're trying to guide someone toward a decision they don't feel ready for, they will feel it. The walls will go up, and once those walls go up, no amount of persuasion will tear them down. Authenticity, on the other hand, disarms. When you show up with genuine curiosity, when your goal is to truly understand the person in front of you, they feel it and their defenses drop. Instead of pulling away, they lean in. The psychology behind this is simple. People want to feel seen, heard, and valued. When you listen deeply, when you ask questions that show you care about more than just making a sale, you give them that experience. And the paradox is, When people stop feeling like they're being sold, they become more open to buying. Let me illustrate. Imagine two conversations. In the first, the salesperson launches into a scripted pitch, barely pausing to breathe, rushing to cover every feature and every benefit. The customer feels like a target, not a person. They nod politely, but inside they're already pulling away. In the second conversation, the salesperson begins by asking, "Tell me what's most important to you right now. What problem are you trying to solve?" They listen without interrupting, without rushing, and only after understanding the person's situation do they offer a solution. The customer doesn't feel pressured, they feel understood. Which conversation do you think builds more trust? Now let's go deeper. Connection is not just about listening, it's about alignment. It's about letting people feel that your intentions are congruent with your words. Authenticity means you don't have to pretend, you don't have to exaggerate, you don't have to pretend your product is perfect for everyone. In fact, sometimes authenticity requires you to admit, I don't think this is the right fit for you. And when you do that, something powerful happens even if that person doesn't buy. They respect you, they trust you. And trust, once established, often circles back in unexpected ways: referrals, recommendations, future opportunities. Philosophically, authenticity is powerful because it restores dignity to the process of selling. It treats the other person not as a target to be closed, but as a human being to be understood. And human beings respond to dignity. When you honor someone's autonomy, when you give them space to choose freely, they feel respected. And respect is the soil in which trust grows. But trust is fragile. It can take years to build and seconds to destroy. That's why consistency matters. If you promise one thing and deliver another, you erode trust. If you speak one way in the sales conversation and behave another way after the contract is signed, you erode trust. Building trust through authentic connection is not just about how you sell, it's about how you serve after the sale. The real measure of authenticity is whether your follow-through matches your words. This is why selling without being salesy requires so much self-awareness. It forces you to check your motives. Am I here to help or am I here to extract? Am I listening to understand or am I listening to respond? Am I willing to walk away if this isn't right for them or am I trying to force a fit? These questions cut to the core of authenticity. And the people who ask them and live by them become magnetic because authenticity cannot be faked. You either are or you aren't. When you build trust, everything changes. People open up. They tell you what they're really struggling with instead of giving surface answers. They lean into your guidance because they feel you're not trying to control them. You're trying to serve them. And ironically, when people feel safe enough to say no, that's when they most often say yes. So let me leave you with this: selling without being salesy is not about learning how to speak better. It's about learning how to listen better. It's not about performing, it's about connecting. It's not about convincing, it's about building trust so strong that people convince themselves. When trust becomes the foundation of your conversations, selling doesn't just become easier, it becomes unnecessary because people don't buy from you, they buy with you. If there's one misconception that ruins more sales conversations than anything else, it's the belief that the only way to get someone to buy is to apply pressure. Pressure comes in many forms: artificial deadlines, scarcity tactics, emotional manipulation, and the classic, if you don't act now, you'll miss out forever. And while these tactics may produce short-term results, they destroy long-term relationships. They leave people feeling like they were cornered rather than cared for. And no matter how good your product is, if someone feels pressured into buying it, resentment will always linger beneath the surface. The alternative is to focus not on pressure, but on value, because value speaks for itself. Value is gravity. It pulls people in without you needing to push them. Think about the last time you made a purchase that felt effortless. You didn't feel forced, you felt drawn. The solution made so much sense for your situation that choosing it was almost inevitable. That's the power of value. It eliminates resistance. Now, here's the challenge: most people misunderstand what value really is. They think value is just about features or benefits. They rattle off bullet points, hoping the prospect will connect the dots. But true value is never found in the product alone. It's found in the transformation the product creates in someone's life. People don't buy a drill because they want a drill. They buy a drill because they want a hole in the wall. And they don't even want the hole. They want what the hole makes possible: hanging a picture, building a shelf, creating a home. The real value is always emotional, not mechanical. When you focus on value, your job as a salesperson shifts. You stop trying to push people into making a decision and instead help them see the gap between where they are and where they want to be, and then show them how your solution bridges that gap. You become less of a persuader and more of a guide. And guides don't pressure, they illuminate. They hold up a mirror so people can see their situation clearly, and then they point toward a path forward. Psychologically, this is powerful because pressure triggers resistance, but value triggers desire. When people feel pressured, their instinct is to protect their autonomy. They resist not because they don't want the product, but because they don't want to lose control. On the other hand, when people see genuine value, their decision feels self-directed. They don't feel manipulated, they feel empowered, and empowerment creates momentum. Let me give you an example. Imagine you're speaking with someone about a financial coaching program. If you pressure them with lines like, "This is your only chance," they might reluctantly say yes, but their trust in you is weakened. But if instead you paint a picture of what their financial life could look like: less stress, more freedom, the ability to provide for their family without constant worry, you're not selling the program, you're revealing the value of the transformation. The decision becomes theirs, and because it's theirs, they own it. Philosophically, this approach restores integrity to the process of selling. It treats the buyer not as someone to be conquered, but as someone to be served. When you focus on value, you're not asking, how can I get them to say yes? You're asking, how can I help them see whether this truly serves them? And that shift changes everything. You no longer fear rejection, because rejection simply means the value you offer isn't aligned with their current needs. And that's okay. Not every product is for every person. But when alignment exists, when the value is real and visible, people will lean in without you having to push. There's also a deeper layer to this. When you focus on value instead of pressure, you begin to attract higher quality clients. People who are pressured into buying are usually the ones who cancel, complain, or regret. But people who see the value clearly and choose willingly are the ones who show up fully, who engage deeply, who become your best testimonials. So by eliminating pressure, you not only create better experiences, you create better outcomes. This is why mastering value is so much more powerful than mastering pressure. Pressure may get you a quick win, but value builds a foundation that multiplies over time. Value earns trust, creates loyalty, and turns customers into advocates. And when you build your business on advocacy instead of manipulation, you don't just get more sales, you get better sales. So here's the simple truth. If you ever find yourself pushing, step back and ask, where have I failed to communicate the value? Because when the value is clear, the decision is easy. And when the decision is easy, no pressure is required. Let me leave you with this thought. People don't want to be pressured into saying yes. They want to be inspired into saying yes. And inspiration comes not from force, but from clarity. Clarity of value, clarity of vision, and clarity of transformation. When you commit to leading with value, selling stops feeling like selling, and buying starts feeling like the natural next step. When it comes to selling without being salesy, few things are more important than the way you frame your offer. Because the truth is, people don't respond to raw information. They respond to interpretation. They respond to meaning. You can have the best product in the world, packed with features and benefits, but if you frame it poorly, people won't see its worth. On the other hand, you can have a relatively simple solution, but if you frame it in a way that highlights its real significance, people will recognize its value almost instantly. Framing is about context. It's about positioning. It's about how you present the offer so that people don't just understand what it is. They understand what it means for them. Think about a painting in a gallery. A piece of art can look ordinary sitting in a cluttered room, but when it's placed in the right frame, under the right lighting with the right backdrop, it suddenly looks priceless. The painting didn't change, the frame did, and in the same way, your offer might not need to change as much as the way you position it. Now, why does framing matter so much? Because people don't buy products or services, they buy stories. They buy narratives that explain how this decision will improve their lives. They buy meanings that elevate the choice from something transactional to something transformational. And it's your responsibility to frame the offer in such a way that it connects with that deeper story. Here's where many people make a mistake. They confuse framing with hype. They think framing is about exaggerating, about making bold claims that stretch the truth. But hype destroys trust, and once trust is gone, everything collapses. Framing isn't about inflating. It's about clarifying. It's about helping people see the true significance of what's in front of them. If your product genuinely changes lives, it deserves to be presented in a way that honors its impact. One of the most powerful ways to frame an offer is by contrasting the cost of inaction with the value of transformation. Most people think in terms of price, how much does it cost? But price without context means nothing. A bottle of water might cost $1 at the store, but on a desert road with no other source of water, that same bottle might be worth your life. Context determines value. So when you frame your offer, you're not simply telling people what they're paying. You're showing them what they're investing in and what it would cost them to stay the same. Psychologically, this taps into something profound. Human beings are more motivated to avoid loss than to pursue gain. If you only frame your offer in terms of potential benefits, people may hesitate. But when you frame it in terms of what they will continue to lose if they do nothing, urgency arises, not the artificial urgency of pressure tactics, but the natural urgency of reality. You're not inventing scarcity, you're revealing the true cost of staying stuck. Philosophically, framing is about alignment. It's about making sure the way you present your offer aligns with the transformation you claim to provide. If your product brings peace of mind, frame it in a way that communicates peace, not chaos. If your service brings clarity, present it clearly, not with cluttered complexity. The way you frame must reflect the outcome because people are already experiencing the promise before they even say yes. Let me give you an example. Imagine you're offering a business consulting package. You could frame it as 8 weekly calls and a workbook. That's factual but uninspiring. Or you could frame it as a guided path that will help you eliminate years of trial and error so you can create in months what would normally take most business owners years. Same offer, different frame. In the second case, the prospect sees time clarity and accelerated progress, not just calls and pages. That shift in perspective makes the offer magnetic. Another key element of framing is ownership. The way you present the offer should make people feel that it belongs to them before they even purchase it. You do this by using language that connects their current desires to the outcome. Instead of saying, this program will help you, say, this program is designed for someone like you, the person who's tired of spinning their wheels and ready to finally see results. That subtle shift allows the listener to see themselves inside the frame, not outside of it. When you frame an offer well, you remove the tension of selling. The conversation no longer feels like you're trying to convince someone. It feels like you're guiding them to recognize what's already in front of them. And here's the most liberating part: when your framing is clear and authentic, you don't have to push, you don't have to manipulate, you don't have to force. Because people will naturally see the offer for what it is, an opportunity to step into a better version of themselves. So remember this: the frame shapes the perception, and the perception shapes the decision. If you want to sell without being salesy, master the art of framing. Frame your offer not as a product, but as a possibility, not as a transaction, but as a transformation. And I'll leave you with this as well. Framed offer doesn't just invite people to buy, it invites them to believe. And when people believe in the story you frame, they don't feel sold to, they feel set free.